ಎಲ್ಲ ವೀರಶೈವ ಸಮಾಜದ ಸದಸ್ಯರಿಗೆ ಸುಸ್ವಾಗತ ಇವತ್ತಿನ ವಿಚಾರ ವೇದಿಕೆ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ. ಹಾಗೂ ನಮ್ಮ ಭಾರತದಿಂದ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸುತ್ತಿರುವ ಬಂಧುಗಳಿಗೂ ಸಹ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ ಸ್ವಾಗತ. ಇವತ್ತು ನಮ್ಮ ಯುವ ನೇತರರಾದ ತ್ರಿಶೂಲ್ ನಾಗನಹಳ್ಳಿ, ಅಮೆರಿಕದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ಬೆಳೆಯುವಾಗ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ನನ್ನ ಧರ್ಮ VSN ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಹೇಗೆ ನನ್ನ ಮೇಲೆ ಒಂದು ಪರಿಣಾಮವನ್ನು ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ನಮ್ಮ ಹತ್ರ ಹಂಚಿಕೊಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ ಬಹಳಷ್ಟು ಜನ ಆಸಕ್ತಿಯಿಂದ ಬಂದಿದ್ದೀರಾ, ಹೊಸದಾಗಿ ನಮ್ಮ ವೇದಿಕೆಗೆ ಬಂದು ಸೇರಿದ್ದೀರಾ. ಖಂಡಿತ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನು ನಾವು ಕೇಳಿ ಸಂತೋಷ ಪಡೋಣ. ಈಗ ಓಂ ಚಾಂಟಿಂಗ್ ಇಂದ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನು ಶುರು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. नमः शिवाय. ओम श्री गुरु बसवलिंगाय नमः. ओम नमः शिवाय. ओम श्री गुरु बसवलिंगाय नमः. ओम नमः शिवाय. ओम श्री गुरु बसवलिंगाय नमः. ಶರಣು ಶರಣಾರ್ಥಿ. ಈಗ ಒಂದು ಅಲ್ಲಮ ಪ್ರಭು ಅವರ ಒಂದು ವಚನವನ್ನು ನಿಮ್ಮ ಹತ್ರ ಹಂಚಿಕೊಂಡು ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮನ ಶುರು ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಇದು ಎಷ್ಟು ಮನೋಜ್ಞವಾಗಿದೆ ಅಂದರೆ, ನಮ್ಮ ಮೆಟೀರಿಯಲಿಸ್ಟಿಕ್ ವರ್ಲ್ಡ್, ನಾವು ಸುತ್ತಮುತ್ತ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಮೆಟೀರಿಯಲಿಸ್ಟಿಕ್ ವರ್ಲ್ಡಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಮನಸ್ಸಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಪರಿಣಾಮ ಬರುತ್ತೆ, ಅದನ್ನು ಹೇಗೆ ನಾವು ಗೆಲ್ಲಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಈ ವಚನದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಕೊಟ್ಟ ಕುದುರೆಯ ನೇರಲರಿಯದೆ, ಕೊಟ್ಟ ಕುದುರೆಯ ನೇರಲರಿಯದೆ ಮತ್ತೊಂದು ಕುದುರೆಯ ನೇರ ಬಯಸುವವರು, ಮತ್ತೊಂದು ಕುದುರೆಯ ನೇರ ಬಯಸುವವರು ವೀರರೂ ಅಲ್ಲ ಧೀರರೂ ಅಲ್ಲ, ವೀರರೂ ಅಲ್ಲ ಧೀರರೂ ಅಲ್ಲ. ಇದು ಕಾರಣ ನೆರೆ ಮೂರು ಲೋಕವೆಲ್ಲವೂ ಹಲ್ಲಣವ ಹೊತ್ತುಕೊಂಡು ತೊಳಲುತ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಹಲ್ಲಣವ ಹೊತ್ತುಕೊಂಡು ತೊಳಲುತ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಗುಹೇಶ್ವರನೆಂಬ ಲಿಂಗವನರತ್ತ ಬಲ್ಲರು, ಗುಹೇಶ್ವರನೆಂಬ ಲಿಂಗವನರತ್ತ ಬಲ್ಲರು. ನೋಡಿ, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಕೊಟ್ಟ ಕುದುರೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅದರಿಂದ ನಮ್ಮ ಜೀವನದಲ್ಲಿ ನಮಗೆ ಸಿಕ್ಕ ಅವಕಾಶಗಳನ್ನು ಉಪಯೋಗಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳದೆ ಬೇರೆದನ್ನ ಆಸೆ ಪಡ್ತೀವಿ, ಅದನ್ನ ಪಡೆಯೋದನ್ನ ನಿಲ್ಲಿಸಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಅಲ್ಲಮ ಪ್ರಭು ಅವರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಈ ಇನ್ನೂ ಬಹಳಷ್ಟು ಅರ್ಥಗಳಿದ್ದಾವೆ ಈ ವಚನದಲ್ಲಿ. ಉದ್ದೇಶ ಅವರನ್ನು ನೆನೆಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಇದನ್ನು ಶುರು ಮಾಡೋದು. ಇವತ್ತಿನ ವಿಚಾರ ವೇದಿಕೆಯ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ ದ ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟರ್ ಈಸ್ Trishul Nagenalli, our youth leader, and also he has been raised by VSNA. That's what he has claimed. When I wanted to tell him, how shall I address him, he said, "Uncle, please put me as raised by VSNA." It is very important. When a youth claims that he has been raised by VSNA, it is good for all of us to know how our esteemed organization, VSNA, which is more than 4 decades, how is impacting the youth and children of our community at large. So it is very important. Trishul is a very unique youth, and I wish we have many youth like that in our community. He has been very active in and very much interested in VSNA faith and activities. After I took over as a president last year, Trishul has been helping me in every step. Because of his technical help, we were able to do a lot of virtual events successfully, and every time he has, even during vacations, from the vacation home, he has helped me. On behalf of our VSNA and our VSNA committee and our board, I am sincerely thankful to Trishul for all the services he has done until today, and he is going to do a lot more in future also. He is active member of our convention. He is already taking part in several committees, and he has got a lot of plans in the convention to organize the youth activities. With this, Trishul, it is your hour and it is your time. I request you to start your presentation. after your presentation, and we will be having some question and answer sessions. So go ahead, Trishul.
Is everyone able to hear me? Yeah, so the way that I wanted to do this presentation here, there's a lot of things that I will talk about in terms of how I grew up in VSNA, what my perspective on what VSNA means to me was when I was young, when I was in elementary school, middle school, that kind of age. When I came to high school, how my relationship with the organization could change. When I went to college, what sort of my thoughts were and how the relationship continues to evolve. And now, as I've graduated college, what my relationship looks like right now and things that I'd like to see sort of happen in the organization to really help me be a continuing part of it as I continue on. There will be plenty of points in this conversation, I think, where, there might be something that you have a question about or a clarification for, and I'm not going to have many slides or points or kind of things to talk about there. So I do want to encourage you, if you do have sort of a clarifying question, please do sort of raise your hand, and we can sort of answer that as I'm talking about it, rather than sort of waiting till everything comes at the end. I'm very happy to do that. So do feel free to maybe put your question in the chat, raise your hand, whichever it is. With that, I see Maitri, I think, has a question right now. Is there anything that wanted to mention off the bat here?
Yeah, we will take the questions later, Trishul. You can continue.
Okay.
We will not until your presentation is over. Then we will have the question and answer session. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good. So, the first couple of minutes, I wanted to talk about what did me growing up in VSNA look like, and I think that means a couple things. Mostly when I was here, I grew up in the Maryland chapter. I've been in Maryland since I was maybe a year or two old. So basically all the time that I can actually remember of my life, I've been here. When I was pretty young, maybe when I was around 5 years old or so, we went to the JSS Spiritual Mission, which is a offshoot of the Suttur Matha in India. They have a branch here in Gaithersburg as well. And so that was a place where I sort of really was first introduced to the concept of Indian culture outside of, my own family. I was I had Kannada at home. I sort of, did the various rituals and all, but I didn't really know anything or know a lot of, wasn't really a part of a larger community per se that practiced a lot of Indian culture there. So JSS is a place where I really began. That's where I took a lot of my original Kannada classes. That's where I met a lot of my friends who spoke Kannada. Many Veerashaivas in the area sort of went to the JSS Matha as well, so I met a lot of them through there as well. At the same time, there were two other organizations that are very important. Kaveri is one that I took a part in when I was in Maryland for a long time. Kaveri is a Kannada Sangha, so think of the Akka convention that happens every few years, sort of going down from there. Akka and Navika, they sort of funnel into both of those. It's not Veerashaiva specific or anything like that. It's anything celebrating the Kannada language in the area. So typically, whenever we would have a function, it would look like Kaveri would host a function like a Yugadi function. Happy Yugadi to all today, or in the recent time here. VSNA would also have a function, and JSS might also have a puja on the day of the celebration. It's sort of how I began to really take part in a lot of the festivals that happened here. So, of course, the organization that we're all here to talk about today, VSNA, is also a very big part of me growing up and sort of what became of my Indian cultural identity when I was here. VSNA definitely feels like one of the most homey ones when I was growing up. In VSNA, when we had a function, the Yugadi function, Deepavali, any of those functions would happen in such a way that we would go to another person's house that's in the community and do a puja there, do a little bit of a vachan discussion there, and then have a lot of have a meal afterward, really get to know the community well. And I think because there was a very strong it was this very strong community that also had quite the numbers. So, we had in Maryland probably 20, 30 families or something like that at least, that I should really say yeah, they really came a lot and I got to know them well, and they really started to feel like an extended family to me. And I think, being a part of that community growing up was really important to me because I think it really teaches me the value of, hey, these are people who also share similar beliefs to me. These are people who I can say, they really helped raise me, and I feel sort of an obligation to them to be like, yeah, I really want to help you out too, right? And it's sort of the very tight cultural community, and these are the people who have sort of been my extended family as I've grown up in the United States. And that was really important to me and really taught me a lot of like interesting values there. As far as what the actual content of the functions would look like, it's a lot of we get there, we do a linga puja, we sort of have a vachana discussion in the sense that I would memorize a vachana that was maybe like 5 or 6 lines long, try to do the pronunciation Kannada correctly, try to recite the vachana in a way that is a lexicographically correct per se, and then have maybe an adult that's in the area do the translation of the vachana and the interpretation of the meaning, and then the next kid would go with their vachana, and then that's sort of how the sort of discussions went. And when I was growing up, elementary and middle school, this didn't, this is just a sort of a thing that I did. I didn't really think about it too much. I didn't really say like, I'm listening to the stories, the interpretation of the vachana, the translation of the vachana, and listening to it, being like, okay, makes sense. It's like kalabera, kolabera, do no evil, do no bad, like those kinds of things. You listen to them when you're like in middle school, elementary school, say it makes sense, and sort of move on from there. You don't really spend a lot of time dwelling on it per se. Like, what does it mean there? What is the context? How can I apply it in my own life? Those sort of questions, not really thinking too much about when I'm pretty young there. So that's sort of how the engagement was with VSNA when I was sort of like a child. Come high school time, I start to develop a little bit of a different relationship with how I sort of see the organization. I think this sort of occurs on the backdrop of we are Veerashaiva, we're growing up here, but we're also part of a larger Indian American community as well. And there are a lot of sort of cultural influences from there. And then even larger than that, we're part of the immigrant population to the US. And there's sort of like a lot of things that you experience culturally in America because you're a part of that group. And so, all the things that sort of happen in high school, when I'm in middle school, I'm not really thinking about a lot of things. I'm just sort of going with the flow. When I come to high school, there becomes a real sort of time crunch in the sense that I'm sure many people who have grown up here can relate. Perhaps many people in India right now can relate. When time comes to high school, I started thinking about like, okay, where do I want to go for college? I joined this like science and math program in high school that was like really rigorous academically. And what all this to say is it starts to create some time pressure, being like, okay, I actually have to think about how I spend my time now. I can't just sort of go along with whatever happens and say, yeah, I'm just going to go do that. I actually have to think, okay, this is something that I want to do here. So how am I going to spend my time to achieve that? It's something that I start thinking about in high school. And I wanted to go over some of the pressures that are there in terms of reasons for why I would or would not do something. There is a pressure that says, I want to do well academically. My parents want me to do well academically. My parents want me to go to a great college. In the VSNA conventions, there's always that like college forum kind of thing that happens. There's like a general pressure in the community to try to like, go do something very good academically, go lock down like a sort of a stable career for yourself, something that you will be, something that I'm sure all the community wants us to be happy when we enter the workforce and all. So there's pressures like that. The other thing is, we're going to high school here. It's not an all Indian high school that we generally attend. We make a lot of friends in the high school that's there, and we try to participate in activities that become more common to all of us. For me, it was joining the robotics team and joining the football team, American football. Both of those groups of people are very different kinds of people, but I want to make friends with a lot of them there. And that means, taking part in activities with them, taking part in, 3-hour football practices after school every day, or 3-hour robotics sessions after school every day. And those are huge time sinks. And those are the things that I really want to focus on, that say, these are important to me and I want to do great at them. And what this is doing here is saying, now I'm thinking about it Monday through Friday. My school bus leaves at 6:30 in the morning. I come back home around like 6:30 p.m. and then I have a lot of homework that I need to do because the academic load is rigorous. And I'm like, okay, I'm exhausted. And then a weekend comes and I'm like, okay, what am I going to do with my time here? Aside from homework and whatever else I have to do. It starts to make me think. It's like, okay, we have these functions that are going on here. Kaveri is hosting a Yugadi function today. VSNA is hosting a Yugadi function today. Do I want to go? Do I want to go? And at this stage, I'm sort of thinking like, okay, I know that I only have so many hours in the week, and I need to focus on using them a certain way. What's the most valuable use of my time here? When I think of why I do want to go to VSNA and Kaveri, and particularly VSNA functions, Kaveri is fun, but VSNA is one that I'm sort of really thinking about because of the tight cultural community. It's like the reason I want to go is because of the community that's there, right? There are a lot of people that I care about, a lot of friends that I have, a lot of uncles and aunties that I really want to see. And for those reasons, I'm like, yes, I want to go. But there's also the reasons that, could be there, but perhaps are not, which are, the continuing discussion of Basava's philosophy, the continuing discussions of the vachanas that we sort of perform. And we had this Anubhava Mandapa at the start of every VSNA function. It seems to get a bit repetitive, right? Because it's, as we go, I'm like, okay, we're sort of saying the same vachanas sort of year in, year out there. That vachana that I said 5 years ago, it seems that a child is saying today. And we're sort of having the same sort of discussions there. For me, when I think about if that's the reason that I want to go to, spend 4 or 5 hours on Saturday doing this thing with VSNA, that's not really a huge draw for me to say, hey, this is something that I really want to spend my time with. This is something that I feel like I'm growing because I'm going to it. There's a lot of things that are growing me in high school, either through academics, either through the new friends that I make, the new hearing about the reasons that they do things, what their life stories are. Across all of those things, the sort of repetition of what we did 2 years ago in terms of the Anubhava Mandapa discussions isn't something that's particularly drawing to say, yeah, this is something I really want to commit to. And I think this is sort of the point where perhaps one begins to reel back a little bit from VSNA, where I'm mostly going to see the friends that I want to see there, the community that I know is really valuable and I really care about. But in terms of maybe the discussion itself that's going on, it's not something that I'm particularly interested in joining there. This sort of continues, I think, through high school, and you have, you have, maybe this is an experience that many of the parents can relate to as well. Maybe the younger folks who have grown up here as well. It starts to get less interesting as you go sort of later in high school and your academic load picks up even more, and you're thinking about college and all. It's, the VSNA thing is a nice thing to go to. It's a nice like sort of community there, but it's not something that you're gonna spend a whole lot of time focusing on. I think this is the beginning. Yeah, this is the beginning point where you say, okay, maybe I sort of take a little bit of a step back from VSNA, and maybe some of you have noticed that in your kids as they, at high school time, try to focus on other things. This, I think, gets blown up a lot when one goes to college. I think at the, from what I've heard a lot from parents and all, it seems like when they go to college is the time that they really step back and you sort of like lose them all together in a sort of, in a fearful way. It sounds like from when I hear it from the parent side, like we're going to lose our kids and they won't ever be connected to Veerashaivism again. And I wanted to spend some time talking about, what my mindset was going into college and why this type of feeling might happen for me and for other and for maybe adults who were like sort of our generation's parents. When we go to college, there's, the common saying is that you are drinking from a fire hose of knowledge, right? There's a lot of ideas that are coming at you at any given point in time, and there's a lot of new people that you are meeting. When I went to college, I was stuck in a dorm with all these people that came from different parts of the country. One of my really good friends was a devout Christian who lived down the hall from me, who sort of had a very different sort of relationship with his religion than perhaps I did with Veerashaivism. He's a much more the case that it was very, very personally meaningful to him, but not so much maybe a community thing that joined him. It was like a driving force that said, why do I do things the way that I do them? It's because God wanted me to do something this way per se. Then so you meet different kinds of people who have different motivations for how they do things in life. you have a lot of questions to answer for yourself. You know, when you're in high school, you have a competition for your time and you have to decide how you're going to use it. But at least for me, it felt like the goals were very clear. It's like, I want to, you know, there are a couple activities that I have picked that I really like, that I want to really do well in. And, you know, sort of after these 4 years, I'm going to go to college, and that's sort of what the next steps are. And I'm going to try to do things in high school to prepare me for that next step when I go to college, make sure that my application process is going to look good, make sure that, you know, I have something that's meaningful when I go there. But the next step is sort of clear. You know, I don't have to think about how am I actually going to live my life and spend my life. Like, I have things that compete for my time. I just have to figure out how to prioritize them, not decide what actually competes for my time a lot of the times. When we go to college, there's a lot of decisions we have to make. You know, we have to pick our own major now. What is the thing that we're actually going to do with our careers? What is the thing that, what is the reasons for picking a career in the first place? And a lot of those are very open-ended questions that require some sort of internal conviction to say, I want to do this thing because it's meaningful to me. And I think that, you know, being unable to really engage when I was in like high school with like, we recited the vachanas and we said, sort of broadly speaking, sort of the moral beliefs that Basavana had outlined in them. But in terms of like, you know, rigorous discussion of what would this mean for me when I was growing up, you know, what would this mean for me in terms of what I do with my career, what I do with my life? Those things, you know, didn't really sink in when I was younger. There weren't really things that I had thought about or that I felt the Vachana discussions really made me think about in any deeper way. When I get to college, you know, I have to actually answer those questions for myself. And there is a plethora of sort of intellectual resources to look at to make that decision framework for you, right? There are your friends around you who have their reasons for doing things that are very, sometimes they can be very significant, being like, I want to go and help these communities that are elsewhere in the world, because that's a very, like, fundamentally, that's the reasons why I do things in the first place. And that's something that I want to continue doing no matter what it is that comes up in life. There are folks that are like, I want to go and, you know, make a good earning for myself, because that's the sort of the thing that I want to do. Maybe I do it for a little bit and then I figure out what a deeper meaning is behind something that I would like to do with my life's purpose there. Others like, I'm just going to make a lot of money and I'm going to be happy with that. And I'm like, that's a way that you can go down too. That all this to be saying, you know, there are plenty of options for how to live one's life when one gets to college, and having, I think, a strong moral foundation that sort of drives you in a certain direction is important when you're coming up with that decision. At the same time, as a lot of these decisions come onto you as a college student, you're sort of disconnected from VSNA altogether. One of my biggest things when I went to college was there was a strong Indian community at college, but very little of it was like Veerashaiva or VSNA or even Kannada. I think I had one other Kannada person in my class of 1700 at Duke. And so, you know, that connection isn't really there to be strong at that point to really give you a lot of moral guidance to say like, hey, think about these things if you're going to try to pick a career in this way. And so you come with a lot of decisions based on what resources you have available to you. Your friends and your classes. I am a huge history nerd, and I decided to take like a lot of history classes that sort of talk to me about the different ways that civilizations have evolved through time, different leaders in history. And I try to take a lot of, you know, thoughts from them to say, you know, why did they do things a particular way? And how can I sort of make that, incorporate that idea into my life? Because for me, my idea was I want to be able to make a change in the world and actually sort of make my career very meaningful in the way that it affects people around me, not just the people who are like immediately around me, like my family and my friends, because I think, you know, as a good person, you always have to do that. But as a thing that I work on 8 hours a day for like the next 20 years, how do I make sure that that has meaning, that has some impact on the world that's actually, I can look back on 20 years of work and say, I'm proud of that. And the way for me to look at that was, look at all these leaders and how did they do it? What did they do? Why did they do it? And what stuck out to me a lot of the times is they're very future oriented. They're very like, let me see what the current situation is right now and let me try to figure out a plan for how we can make sure that the masses, like general population, is benefiting from this as they move on, as we move through time here. In particular, I've always been interested in engineering, and I was going to do engineering when I got to college. I graduated in engineering, and I'm now being a software engineer somewhere else. A lot of times, there's plenty of like business leaders that are in the technology industry now that one can look up to and say, like, they had an idea for how they could really make an impact on the world, and they really sort of drove at it to say, we're going to make computers available to everyone, and that is something that will change the world a lot. And so you look at that story and you're like, wow, that's an idea that I can follow. That's an idea that that's an example of a story that has implications for how I can live my life. And I think having those stories available to you really had an impact on me to say, this is how I would like to spend my time. This is how I would like to make my contribution to the world. I'd like to build something that a lot of people can use to make their lives better at the end of the day. And that's sort of what drove me to say, I want to become an engineer and actually go down this career path, and what sort of drove that inner meaning for me. One thing that I think is, as we're sort of coming to these questions, right, in college, and I'm thinking about what it is that I want to do, it's not that Veerashaivism or Lingaitism itself doesn't have ideas for things that I should be thinking about, right? When I actually think about, what did Basavanna say? What did Akkamahadevi say? What did the Sharanas try to do back in the 12th century? I look at that and I'm like, wow, there are a lot of amazing things that we could talk about here. A lot of they were very brave in the way that they tried to change society, right? The same way that I was looking at these current business leaders or modern leaders, and saying, yeah, they looked at what the current situation is like, saw that how they could make people's lives better in the future, and sort of derived a plan of action that says, we're going to do this thing here that's going to create real change in the world and act upon it. They did that in the 1200s, by when they started Anubhava Mantapa. They said, we're going to sort of reverse how the social order works right now. We don't care who you are. If you would like to join this community that we're building, that is very future oriented, that says we want to build a community that's sort of available for everyone. The idea that you're going to be serving your community here, those are all fantastic moral principles that we can really build something on. But I don't think that they were, particularly things that I was really thinking about in terms of my own life as I was growing up. And so when I came to the decisions of how do I want to spend my time, these are sort of things that I think on a secondary level, right? It's questions that I look at my friends and current leaders who are around in the world right now, and those are sort of places where I start my process, and then come back to being like, wait, yeah, that was the way they did in the 1200s. There's a deep religious philosophy here that I was born with that I'm realizing actually has a meaningful purpose that I can use in my own life here. And that sort of created a second interest in Veerashaivism for me, that says, hey, how can I sort of explore those ideas further? What did they think about and in their time, and what can I learn from them? The same way that I've learned from how leaders today are affecting change, how Gandhi affected change, how founding fathers, or all Martin Luther King, so many social leaders have created change in their times. And Basavanna and the Anubhava Mantapa seem like something that's so culturally close to me that I should be able to learn from here. And that's sort of what drives this interest in learning about Veerashaivism to begin with there. So, this first section here is mostly about how did I arrive, how did I progress through life, and how has my relationship with VSNA changed with Veerashaivism changed throughout this time. But one of the things I also wanted to talk about was Veerashaivism itself and how we sort of act upon it today, right? These thoughts that I had about Basavanna, that they were very revolutionary, that they were changing how society worked in their time, and how I sort of see the Veerashaivism operate today seems very disparate. The philosophy that we should be taking risk upon ourselves in order to effect change for the larger society is something that I don't really see that we do a lot today, and I don't really have a lot of, I think, examples in our own community of taking significant risk for the betterment of society at large, per se. I think there's definitely an interest in sort of making sure that our community is strong, right? That the people, that the families that we sort of interact with on a regular basis, that we maintain very strong relationships with them, that we are able to, ensure that our community and the people who are within it are very strong and supported. But sort of the larger community at large, we do like food drives here and there. We do, we do this like we did some road cleanups and things, but those seem more like one-off things rather than a core practice of how we operate as Veerashaivas today. And that seems to be very off to me, because it's like we could be doing so much more. The principle of dasoha as it existed in the 12th century, it seems to be just sort of a secondary thing that we do now. Generally speaking, I think we try to keep ourselves rather insulated from sort of things that are going on in America right now that could be addressed. We don't really talk about a lot in VSNA, right? We talk about mostly things that happened historically in the 1200s and the 1300s, and try to discuss those things rather than like what's going on today right now and how can we be a community that's an active part of making things better. That's sort of not something that I really see a lot, and something that makes me sad that like we haven't done a ton of that. The second thing that is, I guess, things that would make me concerned, right? This is something that I was talking about with some family members that I had in India at one point too, where it was like, Basavana tried to make this idea of we're going to have a casteless society, and we're going to be operating in a world where we don't actually care what kind of person you are, where you care about the quality of your character, not sort of where you came from and what your background is and what your job is and all those things. Those things explicitly don't matter if you want to become part of the Anubhava Mantapa. That what matters is the quality of your character and how much you're willing to help the common man, the people around you that way. One of my one relative was like, hey, yeah, Basavana tried to do something this way by saying we were trying to make a casteless society, and instead we just made another caste, and now that's sort of how we operate here. And that nature there just seems so incorrect in terms of how we could be operating as with such a rich sort of religious philosophy and original like a philosophical foundation to build upon, that we've sort of just become another caste seems very off-putting, in that why sort of does the principles of how we operate today really align with how we started? And it often feels like no. Just sort of examples that come to mind of like things that are like, why do we spend so much energy on this, right? I know there's been a question of like the Veerashaivism versus Lingayatism question. Like it's something that is it's something that I've heard a lot of discussion about in VSNA. I don't actually know the details of the discussion too much, but it's something that why are we spending so much time discussing that when there could be questions about how do we actually operate to like make the world a better place, right? That's something that seemed to be a core tenet of the principles of the faith back then, but something that we don't really pay much attention to now. There's a huge emphasis on sort of like maintaining religious sort of like, we want to marry within the Veerashaivism caste per se, rather than sort of marrying outside of it. And there's like a huge emphasis on trying to make sure that happens. And it also seems something like that doesn't seem like something Basavana would have approved of back then. Why are we sort of doing it now? And so sort of these kinds of questions, they just come up to mind and are like, it seems like why should, if these are things that are going to be important to an organization, then it's not necessarily an organization that I really want to take a lot of like part in, right? It's not something that I want to be spending my time a lot in, because I think that I could, follow the principles of Veerashaivism much better by doing something outside of it, like trying to make a difference in how the world really operates. So that's sort of the high level sort of questions that I come to think about when I think about, how much do I want to engage with VSNA? How much do I want to ensure that I remain a part of this community? I love the people here, like I really do, and it's been an amazing time. And I feel so lucky and supported to have been a part of this community growing up. And the people that I meet, especially in NextGen, I think are just absolutely incredible. I'm like thoroughly impressed by like how the career path that people have chosen, the way that they do find meaning and the things that they're doing, to me, they seem very much like they're operating on Basavana's principles of how do I sort of make my life meaningful in a way that I contribute back to society. And to me, they really act like very motivated Veerashaivas, but they're turned off by the organization in general because it seems to be sort of focusing on all the wrong questions a lot of the times. It's like we need to maintain purity within the sort of the caste itself. We're already living here. I knew one other Kannada person in my entire 1700 class at Duke. The people that I'm going to be interacting with, the likelihood that I meet someone who is going to be Veerashaiva is small. That's just the nature of things. If we're going to rely on that to maintain, Veerashaivism as a culture in America going forward, I don't think that's going to be a viable solution. I think we can maintain the tenets of Basava philosophy very strongly, because I think that those tenets and those principles are something that many of us who grew up here can strongly believe in, and can take to the next generation of our lives here. But I think the idea that it has to be, following the same traditions and all that we had maybe when our parents in the generation immigrated to America, the idea that that can continue in the same way is something that I think is going to be very, very difficult to do and not necessarily worth spending the time on. And then, yeah, so that's sort of the state of where sort of my principles are on like how I view Veerashaivism, right? Veerashaivism itself to me is something that's very important. The tenets of how Basavana, organized that revolution and the principles for why he did it, I think are very important to me and the reason why I want to do a lot of the things that I do in my life. But the way that we sort of operate in America today seems so far away from that, where it seems like if I really want to be a strong Veerashaiva at heart, in my own heart, feel like I'm doing the things that Basavana said, it seems like I almost shouldn't try to do engage in a lot of discussions that are happening in Lingayat or Veerashaiva community today. And that's a struggle that I don't want to have. Like I want our organization to be one that feels very aligned to being a good Veerashaiva in America, and can support all of us who are going to be focused on trying to make impacts and follow Basavana's moral principles here today. So yeah, that's sort of the end of my discussion on why how Veerashaivism is important to me and what I believe in there. I would be happy to take any questions at this point that you guys might have.
That was a fantastic insight into.
One second, please, Basuraj. I will give opportunity to everybody to ask this question. I know it is Trishul has really kind of questioned our brain, and he has made us to think very powerfully. And I've been very fortunate to
IT, right? I mean, he brought up a lot of key points there. Really good and very well spoken.
Hold on 1 second. 1 second. I will give everybody a chance, please. Just hold on for a second. We'll start the question and answer session. Basuraj, I will give you definitely to you only the first chance. First, I want to express, to all of you, I've been fortunate to work with Trishul, Danya, and many other next-gen youth, and understand their thoughts, and they have shared their thoughts openly, their questions openly, and I had kind of assured them they will have a freedom to seek their own path and their own way within our organization umbrella, and they have been doing very effectively. And again, I had told them that this Vichara Vedike will be to question ourselves, to bring all the thoughts together, because one thing is very clear: we come from Indian culture, we carry certain baggages from there, but as a group we have been very progressive compared to what is happening in Karnataka and other things. We have been very progressive, and especially I am doing for all the presenters. There are many presenters here also, like our Vijay Kamar and everybody. I am questioning all the questions of our youth. I am giving to them, and I am asking them to address that in the Vichar Vedike, because this is very important. Like the Trishul, what he said, and many of us, we feel that we are doing very good things. Definitely, he is very proud of whatever you have done. He is a product of whatever you've done from last 4 decades. Maybe now we need to think, what else we have to do. What else we have to do to make Trishul and people like him, to feel that this is our organization, this is how we want to take it further. That is the goal of Vedike. I'm very happy Trishul coming and kind of initiating the youth involvement very actively in this. Today is the maximum number of people I have seen now, almost nearing to 50. This is thanks to Trishul for your unique contribution. Now, for few minutes, we'll be asking you some question. Already one question Lokesh Hebani has asked already in the chat. What else you want us to do differently? If you have a couple of ideas, can you share?
Harish? Yeah, I think, I can speak a little bit about sort of things that I might want to see done differently in VSNA as we go forward here. I think there's there's two things that I think I can really think of off the top of my head here. I think there's a very lacking sort of intellectual foundation for what being Veerashaiva means here. I think a lot of the times when we say like, what does it mean to be Veerashaiva? A lot of the questions are surrounding the concept of, are we vegetarian or not? Do we wear linga every day? What is the sort of history of how our ancestors came into Veerashaivism or something around that? That's a lot of the questions around like, what does it mean to be Veerashaiva per se? But I think there's a very core principle here of the having very thoughtful discussions that say, what are the moral principles? Like the vachanas themselves are supposed to be simple sort of moral statements, right? That say, this is why this is a principle that I think that we should use to be operating in the world. Can we sort of have more frank discussions about how to take those principles and apply them into our daily lives here? I don't really think that that's been. No, I think actually this forum is probably one of the best examples that we have of that occurring in VSNA. The idea that we're actually discussing questions in the open that can be controversial, that people can have different opinions on and should have different opinions on, right? Like not all the Sharanas have the same opinion on how to do things, but they came together to discuss and debate in a very open fashion. And I think having more of those forums where we can discuss like moral principles, like, hey, why did you do this thing this way? And why did I do the thing this way? Let's figure out sort of what a good reason to do something is. I think if we're able to do that, right, you're able to build a much stronger moral foundation for people when they need to go make big decisions for their own lives, right? Like when I go to college and say, I am going to do this thing for my career path, I'm really just taking in a lot of the things that I'm learning in college at that point, not a whole lot of things from sort of moral philosophy as I grew up. Like there are people that go there that come from their churches and whatnot. There's like a Quaker church, for example, that has a lot of like moral discussion that says, why do we, why do we sort of debate the verses of the Bible in this way and whatnot? And people who sort of grew up in that environment are very attached to the tradition of debate that exists within their organization, and sort of really take that approach when they say like, when I think about why I'm going to do this thing, I have very strong moral principles for like why I'm going to decide to do this or not. Whereas I felt like when I went there, I was like, yeah, I'll figure it out as I go. I'm like, and like I have strong moral principles here, but like it's not something that I've really given a lot of deep thought when I have to encounter these questions. So I think making that more of a tradition throughout the organization, like in your local chapter, trying to bring up subjects that are actually relevant today, like maybe like what's going on in Ukraine there. What is the right? What are ways that we can view the situation here? What is going on with the there's plenty of questions about race relations in America right now. How do we sort of bring a moral idea to these kind of questions that we can approach to say this would be something that's important to do. This is something that's not important to do. Fostering that kind of culture of debate, I think, is going to be something that's very valuable to the organization as a whole, particularly for those of us who are, we're going to be, if we're living in North America, we're going to be a part of all these problems that exist in America. We're going to be a part of it as we grow up, and having some sort of exposure to that and some moral ideas around that when we're growing up, I think it would go a really long way. And I think that's the main thing. Oh, the other thing that I had was around the principles of community service, right? Like one of the things that I always found strange is that when we did the convention, they were always in like very large sort of grandiose halls, very expensive events that lacked, generally speaking, any type of community service kind of event that existed. It's like the Dasoha was sort of giving money to VSNA to throw these like very large, expensive events that like everyone could come and enjoy, but the principle of like really giving back to the community was like wholly missing. In Maryland Convention, we tried to do something where we went to JSS and did like a landscaping event there, and it was good that I think that we did that, and I'm really happy that we did. But I think there's definitely ways that, as an organization, we can take a much bigger stance on community service here and trying to make the world a better place. That, I think would really draw a lot of youth there as well, particularly when they are that high school age, when they're like thinking about how do I maintain that connection to Veerashaivism in a way that is meaningful to me. Like reciting the vachanas in high school, not very meaningful. Actually doing community service in ways that expose you to the community at large, that could be something that's very meaningful and something that you could definitely convince high schoolers to take the time out of the day to do that. Particularly if you say like, hey, with your friends, go do some type of like, we're going to organize like trash cleaning events and all that we're going to say is community service here, and you should be doing them. I think that's something that would keep the high schoolers there engaged, as well as, engage with their community, both internally in terms of the cultural connections they have and friends that they've made in VSNA, as well as the larger American communities that they live in. I think that could be something that's very, very a great change for the organization.
Thank you, Trishul.
Trishul, can I
one second. ಬಸವರಾಜ್ ಪಾಟೀಲ್ ಅವರಿಗೆ ನೀವು ಕೈ ಎತ್ತಿ ಅದನ್ನ ನೀವು ಹೇಳೋದು ಅವಕಾಶ ಕೊಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಬಸವರಾಜ್ ಪಾಟೀಲ್ ನೀವು ಕ್ವಶನ್ ಕೇಳಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಇದ್ರಿ. ಬಸವರಾಜ್ ಹೇಳಿಯಪ್ಪ.
Yeah, no, I think Trishul, one of the things that comes across is that you're fairly frustrated with the state of things, right? That you don't see us living the values and trying to make a difference, right? I mean, what is it that we are accomplishing, right? I mean, as a result of these community gatherings and reading vachanas and talking about what happened in the 12th century, and not really doing anything about in the communities that we live in. So it, you come across as some, as frustrated with the organization. Only comment that I would have is I'm glad to see that you have these questions, you have these frustrations, and maybe you can take the initiative to bring about change, right? Because change starts with one person, right? I mean, as Hari said, we come from India, we have a lot of baggage, and but obviously we're living here in this society, we've adopted this country and cultures and so on. And I totally agree with your thoughts and your frustrations. And so the only question I would have is, when you go through high school, when you go through college, what is that identity, right? Because as you said, you're like one person in a group of 1,700 that probably speaks the Kannada. What is that?
I think you got cut off there. Or did I get cut off? 1 second.
Hello?
Point later in life, but how do you see that?
Did you understand that question, Trishul?
I think I missed it. I think the audio cut out.
You can start answering, yeah.
I think the audio cut out for a sec, so I think I missed the part of that question.
Basraju? Are you still there?
Yeah, sorry, I don't know if my audio is breaking up. But my question is with respect to identity, right? As you go through high school and college and, your work life and career and advancing and advancing in society and the society that you live in, what do you find? I mean, how do you associate yourself, right? I mean, what is that identity, right? Because, yeah, growing up, you came up in a Veerashaiva family, you had this community and things like that. But how do you see yourself? Because obviously, Veerashaivism is not something that is most people would even know around among the people that you interact with. So what do you see as the identity that you carry?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, it's easy to maintain like the Veerashaiva like Lingayat identity when you are in like your local chapter and you're growing up here. It's sort of doable there. But I think like once you get to college, right? Like there's one person who speaks Kannada that outside of me in the entire class. A lot of the times, like there are questions in VSNA is like the subcastes of Veerashaivism that exist in India, and like do we allow sort of there are tensions on like do we allow intermarriage between them? Like what is the like Lingaitism versus Veerashaivism debate? What are the like there's so many like us versus them, like our group versus their group kind of questions within the Indian community in general. For us, when we're in college, it's like the biggest group that we can relate to is the immigrant community, right? Like we have parents who didn't grow up in the United States. That's like division one per se. And that's like the thing that's sort of most relatable, right? That makes us substantially closer to like children of Asian immigrants here, children of Latin immigrants here, like children of African American parents potentially that are like maybe they didn't grow up here, but they're still a minority population in the United States. Like there's a lot of common things that come from that we can say that's part of my identity here, being a minority in the United States. Then there's like within India itself, right? There's like no one really cares too much about like what specific state that you're from in India or what your mother tongue is. If you are Indian, there's like a lot of things that you can sort of commonly believe in as an Indian American here. Like there are yes, there's something special about being close to someone who is also Kannada and as an Indian American, but the sort of the depth at which this person is something I can trust and really understands how I've been growing up. If they're Indian American, you can pretty much be pretty certain that they're going to understand that, and like that's going to be a part of your identity. As you grow up here, you're going to hold pretty similar values. You're going to have a lot of similar experiences. Like you had Indian parents who gave you wonderful chapati, anna, saru, rice when you were growing up. They cared for you a lot. They really cared about your education. They really wanted you to go to a great school. They probably pushed you towards being a doctor or an engineer. They'd probably like want you to get a stable job when you come out of school. They probably have very traditional beliefs about we at home we want to marry within our like language or our like specific group of people there, and maybe you're like, okay, I don't know anyone who's in that specific group of people here, so I'm going to meet whoever I can. Like at that level, like there a lot of the experiences are similar. So going like deeper than that, right, which is like to the specific state, to the specific subculture, like Veerashaiva is almost like a, if I find someone who's Veerashaivism, it's like, wow, you had almost the exact upbringing that I did, or like not really, but like something very similar to me. That's like it's like cool, but like maybe like probably your individual experiences are much more relevant than like the fact that you're Veerashaiva in the US per se, because your individual experiences could have been so different if you grew up in like Oklahoma or like if you grew up in Connecticut. Like that's a much more different experience that we would have than potentially what we could relate on specifically by being Veerashaiva and not just like both Kannada or both Indian or something like that. So that's a sort of level of identity that you sort of develop when you're here. Like Indian American is already pretty granular, and that you can make a lot of amazing friends at that stage that hold similar values to you. I think, yeah.
I have a question. Nayantaraka. Please ask your question. No, okay.
Can I? Hello? Is it okay? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Hello, Trishul. This is Nayantara. I know we worked together on the youth committee for the youth convention advisory group. Did an excellent job there with all the ideas we talked about, and very impressed with having a long talk with you at the last convention. And I was really touched as to how in tune you are to the VSNA community and the happenings in VSNA. And I felt really optimistic that if there are a few more people, if you are an example of the next generation, that made me very, very optimistic of our future. One of the things that my question was, you talked about career goals and life goals. And when you're considering career goals and life goals, you would have liked to have, or you were thinking of what principles, the Sharana principles that you could apply that would help you make those important decisions. And you also talked about other people, your classmates, having a set of principles that they go by. In the Board of Regents, we're trying to find ways to help in some of the issues that you talked about that we seem to be lacking in VSNA. And one of the things that we thought about was having, just like they have Bible study in colleges, a Bible study group where they talk about their faith and the principles, and that continues to help them, help guide them in the decisions they make and the lives they lead. Would it be helpful if VSNA helped youngsters when they go to college and leave their home chapters and go to college, that the local chapter help initiate a Vachana study group or a discussion group in the colleges, so that people like you will also have continued access to discussion and principles of our faith as you continue to make career decisions and life decisions. And I have a lot more questions for you that I can talk later one-on-one, but if you could address that, that'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great point there. I think something that could be very helpful would be, like, I think when you're in college and having like a Vachana study per se, it could be interesting, but I don't think that's a first step per se. I think probably a first step, just like resources that we have, right? Like, I don't really use books anymore, for example, and I look for most of my information online. Do we have like a great place where we can say, these are all the vachanas are? I want to read a vachana about a specific topic. Or like a specific sort of principle. Is that something that I can get online somewhere? Like, not particularly. I have to like Google around and find some sites and all, and maybe I find something that's interesting or not. It's not really sort of accessible that way. Being able to have like a rich set of resources that's provided by VSNA, where I can actually look at the different vachanas online in a searchable way, that could be very interesting. If there are recorded discussions about, people that are my age, or people that are, people who are trying to be thoughtful about like a specific issue that exists in the world, that I could just sort of watch on my own time while I was in college, like I would have definitely done that, to say that, like, these are how people have thought about the ideas from like my own cultural standpoint here, and that's something that I can use as I go forward here. So I think just at a baseline, having like more resources that I can use to learn in the first place, I think are going to be helpful. I think also having things that are in more of like a high school or earlier lifetime frame, right? By the time we get to college, if there's no real solid foundation for there's no real what do you call it, like a precedent, a precedent for like really engaging in VSNA for these sort of intellectuals or like moral principle kind of ideas, then we're not going to start that in college typically, when the connection to VSNA is sort of at its weakest per se. So I think it's probably something that's more like at the middle school level, at the high school level, like having some kind of like education kind of thing that says like, hey, these are some of the vachanas that people talked about, and these are some of the more principles here that we have, right? I know that there are like principles of Veerashaivism that I don't know about yet, that are not just like actually reading and reciting the vachanas per se, but sort of having that tradition when you are in like a middle or high school kind of phase, I think it really establishes that foundation that, that one can build on later. I don't think college is a place to start there, but I think like while you are in your local chapter, having, like there are reading, you can read a vachana from the perspective of like, the Sharanas are amazing people and we really respect them and value them, and we're going to recite their vachanas to honor them. And then you can also read like moral philosophy in a way that's like, we're going to debate this, and like, why is it still true? Is it, in a very like I wouldn't say combative way, but in an argumentative way, right? Where it's like in a more of a debate kind of fashion. And I think having that kind of tradition earlier in like the middle or high school phase can be something that sets the precedent for you to actually, include Veerashaivism in those moral philosophy debates later on in life as well.
So you're saying that we start losing the kids at the high school level, and to get back and jump in at the college level is hard. So we need to engage and do things that are relevant to kids at the college level. I understand that. And the resources, you know, we have a resource center that has not reached its potential, and we've been at it for a while. And it's nice that it's coming from you instead of just keep coming from people like me. And so please stay engaged. And when you see something you don't like or in VSNA, please speak up, because people will stand up and take notice if you speak up. So thank you for staying engaged. Thank you.
Thank you, Akka. Amrutesh, you have next question. Amrutesh? Okay, you have to, 1 second, you have to unmute. Okay. You can go.
I posted my question in the chat. In which stage of your life, is it in daycare, middle school, high school, or college, growing up in US was most challenging for you?
I think the stage coming out of college is probably the most challenging for me so far. It's that stage where you really have the freedom to do whatever you want. There's like no reason that it's going to be pushing you for one reason or the other. And you really have to make a lot of decisions for yourselves. I think through the time in high school, you, from parents and from other social pressures and whatnot, you're like, I got to go to college and do this thing well. And you sort of like have, you know, I know what the next 4 years is sort of supposed to look like and what I need to do to get there. I think once you graduate from college, it's anyone's game, right? It's like you can do anything that you want with it. Particularly, I think a lot of times that happens in college as well, where you sort of like maybe like the last year or two of college, you're like, okay, what am I going to do with myself? And typically like the only parental concerns at that point are like, find a good job and be like secure, stable that way, which is not anything to decide sort of how you are actually going to live your life. It's just like baseline things that I know that people want for themselves as well. But yeah, there's just so many open questions at that point that it can be kind of challenging to wade through it all.
Can I ask a second part on that question? Did any Basava Tattva help you make any decisions in a day-to-day life, in your college life or career?
I think for me, like there's always there's a principle of like, you want to be serving of your community, right? Like that's something that is important in and of itself, no matter like what else exists out there. And I think that is a principle that I know is a Basava philosophy that has affected my own life, right? Like I want to go to a place where I can actually create the most impact for the community that I can. And like, you know, wealth and like those kinds of things are sort of secondary, tertiary concerns. Like if it's not a meaningful job, I'm not going to enjoy it. I'm not going to do it, is sort of the way that I've sort of acted in terms of my own career. But that's also like a pretty general principle, right? Like Basavana isn't the only one who's ever said that community service is important. And so to say that it's like specifically him would probably be, you know, not like it's something that's meaningful to me for sure, but it's not a unique principle to him per se. And like, is that originally the place where it came from? I don't know. I mean, there's so many people who have said it, that it's, you know, we should be as a community trying to go deeper than that. Like, what does community service mean? Like, what does the serving the community mean per se? Those are things that we can discuss. But you know, the broad principle itself is very broad, and sort of a lot of people in history have hinted at that idea.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amrutesh. Gadgepanna, you wanted to ask a question. Can you?
Sure, yeah. Trishul, you were in high school, you were in college, and you used to discuss with colleagues, students, other students, or the VSNA persons. What you discuss about your ID, like what religion ID is what is your religion? How do you identify religiously? Or what was their opinion? How they speak back to you? Or whenever, especially in the college level, you have better understanding and you discuss with others. And what they think about VSNA? How do you tell them what you are? And you already explained some of it now, but can you in a short tell me how how you communicate about your religious ID?
Yeah, definitely. I think when we talk about what the religious ideas are between these different communities, like typically the easiest way to explain it that people will understand is that it's just like another Indian community that exists out there, typically like beyond the state level thing, like what is your mother tongue. Beyond that, no one has any idea really of anyone else's particular community, right? If someone tells me about a sub community of Andhra Pradesh, I have no idea what it means or like what that's actually going to convey per se. So typically it's not like if it is only like very like close friends per se that I'll like say like, yeah, I'm a part of this like cultural organization that's called VSNA, and I do some work for them, and this is sort of the ways around it there. So that's sort of like the ideas, I guess, how would I compare what VSNA is. But I think as far as what Veerashaivism is, or like, if they ask about specifically my religious philosophy, I think what I try to say then is explain what the principles of Basavana are and what the because I think how Veerashaivism approaches religion can be very different than what typically people think of when they say religion. In my mind, there's no like strict mandate that says you must believe in like this God and these stories to be a Veerashaiva. I think it's a much more like, like every Sharana has their own name for God, right? It's just this concept of something that exists as a divine thing that sort of that exists in the world, and so that says that there's something which makes the world happen in a certain way, kind of thing. And all that we can really do individually is try to make the world a better place, and that's sort of in the service of this larger being, God or Brahmana, or like there's a Buddhist philosophy to it. There's like the Tao in Taoism, which is a traditional Chinese faith. There's like the concept of God per se exists across the world. It's this idea that there is some reason why we're all sort of evolving in this way. Whatever that sort of reason is what God is trying to do, kind of thing. But like specifically, like if one were to say that like, God made this miracle to help me do this, like that's not something that really I would buy into, or like a lot of my friends would buy into. But the moral principles that can come from it, right? Like the Charana philosophy that says, we arrive at the best conclusion through a series of discussions and debates. We then try to act in a humble manner to make the community itself a better place from the ground up. Those kinds of ideas I think are very relevant. And oftentimes people say like, well, that's not religion, that's just good like moral philosophy. Like why are you calling it a religion per se? It's like, yeah, okay, that's fair. If you don't really buy it as like a religious idea, then it's a moral philosophy. And that's sort of how I would explain the concept of Veerashaivism to my friends.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Let us go to the next question, 760818. Yeah, I have a number here. You raised your. You can ask the question.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Rupa. I think that number, when I created the account, it got stuck from the meeting. So, but I first want to commend Trishul for this thought process, this talk today. And this is very encouraging coming from a second generation Veerashaiva person in America who is trying to keep connected with the community, which is a great opportunity for all of us here. As parents, I have kids in college who are going through a similar thought process, and as a parent, what you said is very relevant, and we need to face and come up with some way where what the first generation VSNA folks are trying to do, keep our identity alive. We want to pass it on, and that is a very important thing that we do need to do as a community. And I come from California, though now I'm based in Boston area. So California has a different kind of community, VSNA community activity, as opposed to the Northeast, where you mentioned a very important thing about the JSS center that brings back memories and connections. And that is something which is an anchor, right? Like Google is talking about it, like why they want employees to come back in the pandemic situation. So we want anchors, and also social media can be used as an anchor, and something that all the relevant things that you have mentioned, if somehow that happens, that'll be a dream come true for this community. I think I just wanted to commend you for the effort and getting this started. I think we should continue in these lines, the whole community. And I know there's a lot of online material, but we have not been able to unite and give it as in a way that the second generation Americans can consume it. Some effort, and one-off task have to be also brought up at the national level somehow. So very good discussion, and thank you for arranging this.
Thank you, Rupaji. I appreciate. Mayur Naglikar, you had a question. Mayur Naglikar. You can ask the question. Okay, Bhavani, you have a question, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, when I was going to college, I kind of went through the same kind of thing. So I totally with what Trishul was saying. At the same token, because I never found any kind of speaking people or any, forget the Lingayat at that point. What I wanted to ask Trishul is, like, would it make sense for you to use the convention coming up to kind of have these discussions, provide some topics of discussion? I mean, Ukraine, one of them, and really kind of figure out.
We lost you, Bhavani.
What can we any of those kind of be very helpful, and it kind of take us to see. Did you guys hear me?
No, Bhavani.
You kind of cut off there. Can you go back a little bit?
Oh, I was just saying that if you could use the format, the convention forum, to kind of bring up these discussions with the other youths that might be interested. I know you guys don't like calling youths, but the next gen group to be participating in these discussions, provide some topics and let them come up with ideas to how we react to it, or how do we address this, to even think about it. And the other thing I was going to say was, if there is an opportunity to do any kind of service type things while you're in Houston, that could be another way to kind of getting the younger generation engaged.
Yeah, these are definitely things that I think we're trying to figure out what we want to do as part of NextGen for the convention, and I think these are definitely things that we're thinking about in terms of what we'd want to do there. So I hear you there. There's definitely an opportunity there.
Okay. Thank you, Bhavani. Naglikar asked one question, how you are trying to engage all the youth, in using the social media tools. I know that you are doing a lot of effort on that, your NextGen group. Can you share that bit with everybody, what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I can share a little bit about some of the things that we've been doing. So I think one of the, let's see, I can talk a little bit about the career spotlights thing that we've been working on here. So one of the ideas that the way that we started NextGen was we sent out a survey that said, like, hey, what is it that you want to see out of VSNA? And sort of like in broad principles, like, is it like having a social community that you can actually interact with? Because we're all like dispersed around the country. Is it being able to learn more about Veerashaiva teachings from an earlier age? Is it wanting to see social events, more social justice kind of action-oriented things? And so, there was good feedback on all that. It's something that I've been doing in particular has been this career spotlight section, where it's talking about there are some really interesting career paths that have happened for members of VSNA, right? We have people who have gone from I'm a software engineer, and like I sort of went around that career path. There are many people who have went to college and been like, I want to do medicine, and then we're like, maybe I don't want to do medicine, maybe I do want to do it, and then sort of had this like sort of quarter life crisis on like what exactly they want to do, and they eventually end up choosing their own career paths that way, right? So there's a lot of like thought process in that decision that talks about why did I end up doing this thing this way, and like we're trying to essentially start a discussion series that says, hey, we know that you sort of grew up in the VSNA community and now you're off doing your own thing in the world. Can you take us through your journey on and how you ended up in the current career path that you are? And we're trying to make those essentially like 1 hour long interviews that we post on our YouTube channel as like a career spotlight kind of thing. So far we've had 2. One is actually with Danya here today. And Danya's had an awesome career path as well. It was a fantastic discussion. Really appreciate you doing that, Danya. And how she ended up she's in law school right now, but sort of the whole decision path of how to get there, right? I think it was an incredible journey to listen to, and do encourage you to go on our channel and take a listen there. We also did an interview with Sachin Suresh, who is also from the Chicago chapter. He is now a sort of VP of engineering at a like tech startup that's doing sort of these basketball analytics, and like it's really cool to see how he's always been interested in basketball his whole life, and he's sort of melded that into his career as well. While he's been working as a software role, like either as an engineer or a manager or a leader for so many years, but to see how he's always melded his own interests as he went through that and why he did certain things in his career, it was a fantastic discussion to have. But yeah, I think that's one way that we've been trying to sort of use, communicate more stories out to the next generation. We also have our Instagram page where we've been trying to post updates. Most of them, I'd say, correct me, Tushar, and Danya, if this is probably an incorrect phrasing of it, but we've sort of been using it as a way to attract people into events that we do. We've held like a series of Anubhava Mantapas, for example. One that we did was on the actor Chetan Kumar, who is in India right now and has been trying to do a lot of activism over there, and is currently in some trouble with the authorities given how things are going in Karnataka right now. But did a session on him and sort of what his how his path was, because he grew up here, went to Yale, and then went to India and tried to do this kind of service idea over there. So we had an Anubhava Mantapa about that. We've had a few others, blanking on exactly the topics of so those are the
COVID, I believe.
Yeah. One we had COVID as well, and what the responses looked like here. What about this, like, the US has like this huge stockpile of vaccines that they're not really distributing out to the rest of the world. Like, how do we sort of view that? What are the moral implications of that? And really interesting questions that we can discuss as a group. And like, we're using social media as a means of sort of trying to engage that community. We have a Slack group where all of our NextGen members can we can discuss the events that we're going to be hosting in the future. Our convention planning is happening in there. And so like that's a community where people can engage as well. So we're just trying to create those platforms. Like, so things are going on. Please join us as we discuss things, listen to how people have done their careers. Sort of a, I guess that's more of a what has NextGen done here. I'm not officially speaking on behalf of NextGen here, by the way. So that's this is not like official word from NextGen per se.
Thank you, Trishul. Anybody else has any questions? If anybody else, please rise or come on video. Thank you. Mayur Nagalikar is sending thanks for you. It's a very good one. Sajanana, please ask a question.
Trishul, I did not have any question because I have spoken enough to you over the last 2-3 years. And I am glad you could summarize your thoughts this today. Came out very well. I'm very happy with what you are doing with NextGen Group. And as you suggested, I think the Houston convention will try to focus it more and more for NextGen. I'm glad you mentioned few phrases like why Lingayat versus Veerashaiva. Why did we make the caste again? Baswanda never said it's a caste, and it's a way of life that the Sharnas taught us. So can we use that as our motto in terms of where VSNA should go for youth? You have raised good questions. I'm happy for those. Let us answer those this year onwards.
Thank you, Anna.
Mhm.
Umesh Murthy has come from our MD, Maryland chapter, who is very familiar to Trishul and myself. Umesh, you have any question or comment? Umesh? Okay, Lokesh, you have a question. Please ask.
It's not a question, Harish. Just want to congratulate Trishul for the achievements he has done, being a VSNA youth, and he did a great job in giving this talk today. And I just wanted to ask Trishul and a couple of other youths who have already done a great job by being part of our VSNA all through in their local chapters or national chapters, to engage other youths as role models in our community, so that we can bring in more and more youth. As per my first question, that we can engage more and more our youth to participate in our local and national events. And thank you, Harish, for bringing this excellent talk by Trishul. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. With your good wishes, and with the beginning what Trishul has done, I want all our youth to use this platform, what we have created, for open discussion and, share our thoughts. We are not asking anybody to follow or anything. Just, share your thought. We are a diversified group with a diversified beliefs, coming with that baggage from the Karnataka, from hometown, home state. So this is an opportunity where we can share our ideas, at least know each other, how many different ideas we have, and also understand what our youth want. That is very important. See, I am. Some people ask me why you are so passionate about VSNA. I became a life member in 2003. I was just participant, and I never took any lead roles or anything in the VSNA. In last couple of years, you know, after raising my children, the way I raised, Trishul has raised in the Maryland chapter, I raised my two children in the Maryland chapter with people like uncles like Umesh Murthy, Jayashree Jagdish, all these people as a community helped me to raise my children. And when the way they raised, I thought I am going to lose them in this melting pot of the culture. Last 3 or 4 years, I was shocked to see that, they have inculcated so many Indian values, and they listen to parents better than me growing up in Karnataka. I was shocked. How did they get these values? When I look back, believe me, my gratefulness for the VSNA completely came to my heart. Because without VSNA, without Kaveri, what Trishul mentioned in Maryland area, my children would have lost them in this melting pot. They today retain this, proud Veerashaivism and our values, not the rituals. They don't follow our rituals, just like the Trishul said. They follow our principles, our values, our Sharana message, whatever they have given, those things they adhere very clearly. And that makes them proud. And my son, in front of Umesh Murthy, 2005, in our convention claimed, I am proud Veerashaiva. And also, they feel that we are way better than the people and the various subcastes in Karnataka, because here we all feel we are one. At least we are one step ahead of them. That's why I told in the beginning, we are slightly progressive than them, because we feel we are all one. There is no subdivisions among us. VSNA is our mata, and we are all one group following that mata. Now I ask Umesh Murthy, if you have any questions or your comments, please share. Umesh Murthy is from Maryland chapter. He is a senior leader of the chapter, and he had participated in our previous conventions many times as a leader. Umesh Murthy.
Yeah, thanks, Harish. Yeah, I've been involved in the organization since probably mid-80s and seen all the kids grow up. And then I came a little late to this. I think I've seen Trishul grow up, from a very young age here in Maryland. And he's he's grown into a fine gentleman. And the speech I listened, what I heard from him, and the question and answer sessions is fantastic. And like you said, being together has brought us all as one Veerashaiva value system. I think we inculcate more into our kids more than what happens in India. I think here, Harish, like you said, this is like one big Veerashaiva family, and we follow Basava, teachings. In fact, right now, I'm like cleaning up, doing some work in the house. We are meeting Yugadi in our house this evening in about 4 hours. The Maryland chapter is meeting, and then I think we have a Zoom call set up with you. I'm not sure, Harish, I don't know what Nijguna has done. So there's going to be 70 people here. Of course, if Trishul was here and you guys were still in Maryland, would have been nice. But, we're doing what we can to promote the thing. And this is the first face-to-face meeting in our house. Is in our house after 2 years of COVID and being virtual gatherings all this couple of years. So again, Harish, we'll probably see you in about a few hours. I don't know if Nijguna has talked to you about it. But, I enjoyed Trishul's speech and question and answers, but I came a little late. I was doing things honey-do list. So thanks, Harish, for giving me the opportunity to say a few words. And congratulations, Trishul. You did a great job.
I just want to say, I appreciate all the
parents are going to be here. That's my house.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I appreciate all the kind words from people. It means a lot. I do think that the way that I would appreciate the most per se, right? There's a lot of we are not that many people in NextGen. Right? There are only a few of us. Getting people to be engaged in NextGen is a difficult challenge. There are not that many of us out in the country, and a lot of us have been disconnected as they went to college. I think something that's going to be very important is some of the values that I've talked about today, right? Like the ability to actually make engaging, like sort of even like contested debate a regular practice as part of your local chapter, as part of the activities that you do in VSNA. The idea of like creating opportunities for people to go out and do community service in a meaningful way to them. Making those things available in your local chapter. It'd be an amazing thing to see across VSNA, right? And like I said, like when we're in high school, we're like trying to figure out what we want to do with our time and how we're going to live our lives. And people do try out that thing, but it's difficult for generally a high schooler to start it. And then for a person in college, they're off doing their own thing, trying to figure out their own life, and then disconnected from VSNA for a little bit, and they come back when they're like sort of leaving college and all. I think that I appreciate the kind words that everyone is saying. I do want to also make sure to communicate that making those changes into the local chapter, I think is going to be things that will make you all and me much happier in the long term for the future of VSNA. And so I think that's the thing that I wanted to highlight as we near the end of the session here.
Thank you, Trishul. I think we are almost 90 minutes now. I'll just make a closing statement, then we'll close. Most important is, this May 7th, we are having International Basava Jayanti 2022. Please make sure it's a virtual event, and we are trying to get 50 organizations, more than them, they are getting involved. Please may take time and tell your friends also to participate. The aim of this International Basava Jayanti, the VSNA has started, is to share Basava's message to outside our community, to Kannadigas, to Indians and others. And always every effort is going to go in small steps. If we consistently do year after year, I think this can become a major international event where people from New Zealand, Australia, they're actively participating, strongly supporting from Middle East and also from Europe also. So let us push this one and take that leadership what VSNA has shown in North America, extend it to the whole world. That is the aim. And second one, for the first time, the way the Umesh told, they are trying to meet in person, first time in Maryland. This time we are trying to meet in person in our convention at Houston. supported by Houston community, but mostly organized by the Central VSNA. And all of you, please tell your friends, tell your seniors to come and participate. It is very, very important because the chain of conventions happening from 4 decades kind of has stopped from last 3 years. Let us again kickstart. And again, Trishul pointed out a very good point. Don't try to make, try to compete with the other conventions in the venue where you are hosting, or how much money you are spending, or how much is your budget. Don't try to focus on that. Focus on the value and the content. And like Sajjan suggested, we are going to focus this on most on NextGen. And Trishul is working with me very closely along with the NextGen leaders like Danya and other people to have a lot of activities in this convention focused on youth and NextGen. So let us make it happen. Let us kickstart this convention again. So next year again it can continue. But let us go more on the content and value and building that solidarity and the community feeling at the national level. And this is very, very important. The chapters are, they're becoming small groups. We need to create that national integrated view and national integrated approach for our community that will give the opportunity. Today, we have a national platform for all our children to come and recite Vachana. In the last Talents Festival, 140 children, even children from New Zealand participated in this Vachana competition. It's a small effort. If we try every year, this can become a major event, where all Veerashaiva children can participate and we can take this awareness further. With this, I sincerely thank Trishul for rejuvenating this group. And with you today, we reached 50 people. There are more than 15 people on the YouTube and more than 33 people in Zoom. Thank you very much for this real interest. I welcome all other youth, like Tushar is another great leader we have here. And Danya is another very powerful speaking person. You all need to come and express yourself. And I want our seniors, believe me, our seniors, we have the baggage. We have the baggage from Karnataka, but we are very open. We have learned to be open in this melting pot, and we listen to you. And we are going to allow you to change this organization the way you want, or the way you will fit your next generation. This is my humble, but again, this platform is not to tell you anything. This platform, Vichar Vedika, is to come and share your thoughts. It can be different. Sometimes it will be very, very different, but this is a platform where you can openly talk. This is one thing what we wanted to create in VSNA, where people can come and talk about what they really feel, instead of worried about what others are going to think. This is an open platform. You can express your thoughts. With this, I'm trying to close. If any closing comment, Trishul, if you have any closing comment, you can do, and then we can close the program.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for the closing statement time there. Yeah, I think, there are a lot of things that I've talked about here in terms of values that we can see change in the organization. It's going to be very difficult for us as NextGen members to sort of single-handedly take over the organization without a lot of we're not trying to replace everyone here or something like that. That's going to be not a really doable thing per se. It's going to need a values change, a sort of action change from all members of the VSNA community, right? We don't necessarily want to have to create a separate entire NextGen sort of communication stream, talking stream, all these things, because we need to be separate from VSNA in that way. Ideally, these values are all things that just happen in VSNA as they are, right? Without us having to sort of start something separately to make sure that people understand that yes, these are the values that we're going to hold and they're going to be different from VSNA. We want those values to be the same. I think it sounds like from the discussions that we're having here today, people are very open to having these values in VSNA. And I think, taking that change in your local chapter and trying to change the culture there to foster open debate, trying to foster community service as a first-class thing that VSNA does. I think all those things are going to be very powerful to engage those people who are in your local chapter right now, right? Those current middle schoolers, those current high schoolers. Don't let them don't let them sort of drift away as perhaps many of us have in the past. Keep them engaged right now, right there. And that's something that you guys can do, right? We're not going to be able to. We're very small at the moment. We there's a lot of work to do to build this kind of culture here, but the values change that we're trying to propose, I think, is something that everyone can agree with. And I think we need people to take those values into the local chapters as adults, not just as next gen, to make sure that we can have that have that VSNA for all going in the future.
Thank you, Trishul. Really appreciate. And I'm challenging every time we meet in Vichar Vedike, I challenge seniors like Gadigapanna, Sajjananna, Gurusami Anna, Nayanakka, Ellarugu. I'm challenging them every time. Somehow we were not that much experienced. We lost our children. We could not bring them into the fold of VSNA very strongly. At least in my case, I agree. And I'm challenging them. What you guys, you don't have any risk now. You've finished your life in the sense, the major active part. Now it is a kind of thinking part. You understood this, our challenges here. So guide our grandchildren. Redefine VSNA, guide our grandchildren how to take this organization and the beliefs based on principles and values to further, so that this community can grow strongly with this solidarity among us. So with this, I'm going to close this program today. Thank you very much. This has been an excellent 1.5 hours we have spent in many weeks. Thank you, Trishul. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Harish.
Thank you.
Thanks, Harish and Trishul.
Thank you.
Thanks all.